Okay, so picking up where we left things, I've chosen Locke, Edgar, Celeste, and Sabin to continue the adventure while Gal and Cyan chill here in Narsh, trying to hold down fort, so to speak. Our primary objective is to find Terra, and she's gone batshit crazy, morphing into full Esper mode, and she's just flown off somewhere. We have no idea where she's off to. After speaking with some of the townsfolk here in Narsh, we do get some direction, and our first stop is going to be Figaro Castle. We're about to be in desperate need of traversing huge chunks of terrain, and we're not going to be able to get to our destination without taking advantage of that sweet, sweet subterranean travel mode that Figaro Castle boasts. There's also a bit more editing in this one than usual because I spent a great deal of time wandering around Narsh and a couple other towns, just, primarily trying to make sure that I didn't forget any hidden areas or events that are going to develop backstory for our characters. And on top of that, there's also quite a few items of interest that I definitely did not want to miss out on. So here in Narsh, let me just kind of review some of the purchases I made here. I got 3 jeweled rings. Now I've explained the significance of the ribbon already, which protects you from every status ailment, but we only have 1 of those right now, which is not nearly enough to go around for 4 party members. So what the jeweled rings are going to do is they protect us from petrify and dark. Although they're not critical right this second, it's going to make life a lot easier on us in the near future. I also picked up the Full Moon and the Thief Knife, both of which are for Locke. The Full Moon lets Locke do full damage from the back row, and the Thief Knife gives Locke an opportunity to steal on every attack he makes. So Locke really got hooked up after this last encounter. Now, I mentioned I was really trying to rack my brain in attempts to make sure that I didn't forget any hidden events or some such, but despite that, I still forgot something. Once we get here to Figaro, Sabin becomes nostalgic and he runs off. And if you follow him, you'll find him waiting in the throne room, and this triggers a flashback event that explains some of the details surrounding the death of Edgar and Sabin's father, the former king of Figaro. And long story short, Edgar and Sabin, neither of them wanted anything to do with the succession. They both wanted their own lives. They wanted to pursue, they wanted to pursue different things other than being obligated to being the king of Figaro. And unfortunately, I missed that event. I kept my head down and just kept moving and completely forgot to do it. But being the paranoid gamer that I am, I do have a save file that is prior to the events of the battle we just had with Kefka. So the next upload is going to be just that section that I missed, that flashback event discussing the death of Edgar and Sabin's father. So unfortunately, with FF6, they only give you 3 save files. 3. So for someone like me, that's not nearly enough to cover all my bases. And because I'm recording this playthrough, it's even more important that I don't accidentally overwrite a save before I'm absolutely ready to move on. And fortunately, I do have a save to go back. It's not going to be the most efficient thing ever, but it's absolutely necessary. I would hate for this event to be excluded from the playthrough, because while it's not really important to the plot, it's just a really nice moment of character development. And while I'm on that, there's a lot of different events from this point on that are just very easy to miss. In fact, the next town that we go to gives you a lot of detail about Locke's backstory. So there's just all kinds of shit like that that's just really easy to pass up. But let's talk about some of the things we got here as well in Figaro. I picked up some Revivify. Now, this next stretch of land, I can't remember if they only... I think in the desert areas, there's an enemy that can turn you into a zombie, which is really fucking bad. And if you don't have Revivify for that, then you're kind of screwed. So I wanted to make sure that I was stocked on that. And we also picked up a couple more tools for Edgar, primarily Flash. That tool is insane. You know, if you thought Edgar was OP already, he's even more OP now. The drill, you could argue that that was really an unnecessary purchase, and because I'm so limited in funds right now, I probably shouldn't have even bought it, because we're about to get an item called the Chainsaw for Edgar, another tool, and it does what the drill does, but better, right? So you could argue that the drill was a completely unnecessary purchase, probably a waste of money there, but it's okay. So now we have arrived in Collagen. The very first guy that we speak to gives us more direction, and boy do I miss the days where you actually had to talk to NPCs and do some reading to figure out where it is you need to go, as opposed to constantly having markers and shit all over your mini-map or whatever, just telling you exactly where you need to go. Not that I hate those mechanics or anything. There's some games where that mechanic works just fine, but I prefer the old way of doing things and finding out where you need to go, as opposed to just having the game hold my hand every step of the way. Another few things about this town. This guy right here tells us a bit about the Colosseum, which is one of those lucrative areas that I've mentioned in the past, where eventually, once we get to the Colosseum, we are going to do a bit of fighting there for sure. I'm not sure how thorough I'm going to be with the Colosseum, but I'll definitely be pointing out some really interesting things in regards to the Colosseum. You can walk into the Colosseum and leave being infinitely stronger, right? You can really get some lucrative stuff there. And we're certainly going to bulk up our funds at some point, because, you know, right now, we've just been flying through the game. We haven't done any grinding whatsoever, so I am having to be really cautious with what I do buy. But at some point or another, I'm definitely going to beef up my my income. Now, oh, and I think there's also mention of the Opera House, which is just one of those classic locations in FF6 that we're not too far away from, in all honesty. And here we get some details surrounding Locke's past. Just another example of little events and flashbacks that are quite easy to miss if you're not thorough enough. Locke's definitely got some pretty depressing stuff in his past. In fact, pretty much every character does in Final Fantasy VI, and that's something that I really love about this game. You could say the same thing about a lot of characters throughout the history of the series, but I guess, you know, the only characters in 6 that don't have a dark past, or at least characters where they don't really tell you much about their past are Umaro, Gogo, and Mog. Pretty much everyone else, you really find a great deal out about them over time, and it's just incredible to me. Almost every character has a really dark past, or at least they've had a couple events happen to them that are just life-shattering. And despite that, they have moved forward, and they're just unbelievably upbeat and charismatic, despite these horrible events. Locke, for example, he lost the love of his life. She almost fell to her death and developed amnesia, completely forgot who he was. He was blamed for all of that, and I can only imagine. Oh, and we're just going to go ahead and steal an elixir from the clock after having that heartfelt moment there. I'd say that's pretty befitting of Locke, to be honest. But there's actually quite a bit in this town that is just so easy to miss. I almost missed something as well, and I'll point it out once we get there, but sorry about that. But as I was saying, it's a good thing that we had some money left over to spend at the armor shop here, because we just picked up a really solid defensive upgrade for the entire party in those 4 mithril shields. Going into this next pretty beefy dungeon segment of the game, there's at least one enemy that I can think of that can hit like a truck, so any kind of investment in defense is pretty smart. Now here, we get some more details about Locke and Rachel. Apparently, Locke enlisted the help of this creepy old man to keep Rachel in suspended animation down in his basement, all the while standing behind her bed staring at her while she sleeps. Something that I always found really bizarre about this part as well is this old herbologist doesn't have a name. He's not critical to the main plot by any means. This is pretty nitpicky, but he is a pretty big part of Locke's story. So I just find it a really interesting, let's say, design decision to keep this NPC nameless, right? I don't know. I've always scratched my head at this part, but unfortunately, after Locke was run out of town, being blamed for Rachel's near death and amnesia, the Empire raided, and Rachel was killed during the raid, or at least was nearly killed, thanks to Locke. And here is what I almost forgot. I was really not on my game for this playthrough. Not only did I forget about Sabin and Edgar's flashback moment, but I almost forgot my boy, Shadow. He's just chilling here in the inn. What we could have done, oh, and of course Shadow is as rude and edgy as always. What we could have done is we could have come here with 3 party members instead of 4, which would have allowed us to grab Shadow for this next section of the game. Even if I had been ready for it, I don't think I would have grabbed Shadow for this anyway. As per usual, Shadow has a chance of leaving the party after every encounter, so he can really screw you over, man. Going into a dungeon and losing Shadow in the middle of a dungeon and leaving you with 3 party members instead of 4 can really hurt. So probably wouldn't have done it anyway, despite how much I love Shadow. Now, the enemies in between Collagen and Jador, which is our next destination, there's not a whole lot of threat here. There is one enemy in this little patch of desert by Jador that can turn you into a zombie, which is really bad if you don't have Revivify at this point in the game. But we grabbed some from South Figaro, so we're good to go at this point, and we avoided the desert area anyway. All of these other enemies pretty much get wiped out by one use of Edgar's flash tool, and on top of that, you know, we have quite a bit of AoE damage going on. Sabin is just about to hit the point where he can use Fire Dance. I thought Fire Dance was a level 14 ability, but it's actually level 15. Oh, and here's something to talk about. Celeste just gained a level after that encounter, and for gaining that level, she learns Imp. Almost an invaluable spell in certain encounters, and in fact, that enemy that I was just talking about that can hit like a truck here in this next dungeon, you can actually avoid getting hit by some pretty brutal abilities by turning these enemies into an imp. What it does is it actually kind of wipes their ability board, so it makes it so where they lose the ability to use those devastating skills on you. It can prove to be invaluable. It's certainly not something that you need to have or really need to know about, but man, it's certainly useful if you use it appropriately. Now Sabin, Fire Dance, let's talk about that Blitz real quick. Up until this point, I've had Slam, Pummel, and Aurabolt, or Suplex, right? Not Slam. Suplex, Pummel, and Aurabolt. I've kind of been stuck with those for a while, and, you know, all of which are single target abilities. But at 15, we get Fire Dance, which is a really, really sick AoE ability for Sabin. Oh, and here I am. I thought that Fire Dance was a level 14 ability. When I saw that he was 14, I was like, oh man, have I just been playing without using Fire Dance this entire time? But no, as it turns out, it's actually a level 15 ability. So once we get Fire Dance, that combined with Edgar's Flash Tool is going to devastate. It's going to absolutely devastate the board. It's going to be more AoE than what we need at this point. So the other characters, Locke and Celeste, can really sit back and chill. I can pretty much primarily use Runic and Supplemental Healing on Celeste, and with Locke I can steal, and because I picked up the Thief Knife as well, I can do some single target damage while I'm attempting to steal. So really, really nice party composition I have going here. And, you know, certainly once Sabin hits level 15, which at this point he's got to be getting pretty close. So, I think that's pretty much everything that I needed to talk about in this one. I really wanted to get this episode out sooner, but you know, the Christmas and New Year's holidays are over. I've had a lot of time off anyway, and I've had a lot of family stuff going on as well. I've been having to take off a lot of time from work to travel. I've had 2 cousins get married this year. Pretty crazy. Time freaking flies, man. But I'm kind of back to the grindstone now. So I don't have as much time to work on things, and plus, I've been playing a shitload of EVE Online, so a lot of my gaming has been devoted to that. But I'm out of here, guys. I'll see you soon.